What if the people you trusted the most were hiding a secret that could ruin your entire life? My name is Riley Thompson, and the day everything changed began like any other Sunday brunch. The clinking of silverware, the soft hum of a jazz playlist in the background, and the occasional laugh from my cousins filled the room. I was halfway through a mimosa when my grandfather, sitting directly across from me, lifted his glass and said with a wide, contented smile, "I'm so glad you're enjoying the apartment I bought you, Riley." I froze. The rim of the glass touched my lip, but the liquid stayed still. Around the table, every sound died. My aunt stopped mid-chew. My uncle looked up from his phone, and my mother's face twisted in confusion, but it was my father's reaction that nailed the silence into place. His fork slipped from his hand, hitting the plate with a loud, brittle clang. The blood drained from my face. Apartment. I live in a tiny converted garage behind someone's house in East Houston, mold in the ceiling, rust in the sink, rent paid in cash. It was never meant to be permanent, but somehow 3 years later I was still there. I wiped my hand on the napkin in my lap, heart pounding like a war drum in my chest. I looked up at Grandpa. "I think there's been a mistake," I said quietly. "I don't have an apartment." Grandpa's smile faltered, his eyebrows knit together in confusion. "No," he said, blinking. "I wired the money to your dad. He told me he surprised you with it after college." The words dropped like lead in the middle of the table. My dad's face turned an ashen shade of gray. My mother stared at him, her lips twitching like she was trying to calculate how to respond, or how to lie. And me, I felt nothing, just a cold, flat calm. "You never did," I said, clearly not looking at my dad but knowing he was listening. "No one bought me an apartment. I've been living in someone's garage for years." No one spoke. Even the waiter who had just approached with a coffee refill turned and walked away without a word. That silence, it wasn't awkward. It was heavy, exposing, dangerous. "I thought maybe you were just busy," I said, my voice trembling ever so slightly but refusing to break. "But now I see. I wasn't forgotten. I was deceived." I reached for my coat, threw down my napkin, and stood up slowly. I hadn't planned to make a scene today. I hadn't even planned to speak. But Grandpa's innocent remark had pulled the curtain open, and behind it was a rot that had been festering for years. As I walked out, I heard the legs of chairs scrape against the floor. Someone called my name, but I didn't stop. I needed air. I needed space. But mostly I needed truth. If you've ever uncovered a family secret in the most unexpected moment, or been blindsided by the people you trusted, most leave a like and stay with me. This story is just getting started. I didn't stop walking until I hit the parking lot where the morning sun cast long shadows across the asphalt. I didn't cry, not yet. I wouldn't give them that. But then I heard hurried footsteps behind me. My name called again, softer this time. "Riley, wait." I turned. It was Grandpa. He looked older. Not old in the way he always had with his salt and pepper hair and crisp suits. No, this was different. This was the look of someone who had just seen his world slip out from under him. His shoulders were slumped. His mimosa glow had faded, and in its place was something raw. "Please tell me," he said, stepping closer, "you're not lying to me." "I wouldn't," I said, my voice hoarse. I didn't even know there was something to lie about. "I sent $75,000, he whispered. "To your father. Right after your graduation. I told him it was for your place. A fresh start." "Well, I started," I said, forcing a bitter smile, "just not the way you imagined." Then for the first time in years, I let someone in. I told him everything. About the cracked concrete floors, the neighbor's dog that barked until 2 a.m., the broken heater, the rent paid in untraceable cash, the landlord who chain-smoked through our walls until my clothes stank of cigarettes. "You really live like that?" he asked. I nodded, and I asked Dad for help once. Just a lead, a contact. He told me to flip burgers first, build some character. Grandpa's mouth tightened, and he told me you didn't want help. Said you were too proud, that you'd already found your dream place and didn't want to owe anybody. I didn't know there was anything to be grateful for, I said, crossing my arms. He made sure I never did. There was silence between us, then stretched tight and filled with the weight of years neither of us could take back. I expected him to say something like, "I should have checked," or "I trusted him." But what he said instead caught me off guard. "I want to see it," he said. I blinked. "Why?" "Because if it's as bad as you say," he said, jaw clenched, "then he didn't just steal from you. He stole from both of us. And I'm done being lied to." That night, for the first time ever, I brought my grandfather home with me. We drove in silence through streets lined with shuttered convenience stores and auto shops with flickering neon signs. When we reached my place, a converted garage behind a rundown craftsman, he said nothing as I led him down the uneven side steps to the door. The bulb above us flickered. I unlocked the rusted knob and pushed it open. "Welcome to my palace," I said quietly. He stepped inside, ducking under the low frame. His gaze moved across the worn-out couch, the wobbly bookcase, the mattress pushed next to the laundry unit, and the ceiling tiles stained with water damage. He didn't say a word. He just sat on the edge of the bed, my only bed, and let out a breath so heavy it felt like it came from his bones. "This is where you've been living since college?" he asked. I nodded. "Since day one." He looked down at his hands, rubbed them over his face, and said, "He told me he was saving the rest for your wedding." "There is no rest," I said flatly. "There is no wedding." He met my eyes. "Not anymore," he said, standing. "Tomorrow we're going to the bank. And then to the lawyer. And after that, your father and I are going to have a very long conversation." And in that moment, something shifted inside me. Not hope, not yet, but something just as dangerous. Conviction. Have you ever uncovered the truth and realized it wasn't just betrayal, it was theft of your future? If this moment struck a chord, drop a comment and tell me what you would have done. Because for the first time, I was about to fight back. I barely slept that night. The hum of the old fridge, the hiss of pipes behind the wall, they'd always been background noise, a kind of white static I had grown used to. But tonight they roared. Every creak in the ceiling echoed with memory, every shadow on the wall whispered old wounds. But I wasn't thinking about the mildew or the cigarette-stained drywall. I was thinking about what Grandpa said before he left. "We're going to the bank." And then the lawyer. That morning, before my alarm even had the chance to buzz, I smelled burnt coffee. I stumbled out of bed barefoot on cold concrete and found Grandpa standing by the tiny kitchen counter, cell phone pressed to his ear, his voice hard as steel. "I don't care if it's Sunday," he said. "Howard, find the paperwork. I want every wire transfer, traced every memo, every receipt. And draft a letter immediately. Daniel Whitmore is no longer authorized to act in any financial capacity under my name. That ends today." I leaned quietly in the hallway, wrapped in a threadbare hoodie, and just listened. I had never heard him like this. Not even years ago when Dad crashed his truck or when Mom forgot his heart medication. No, this wasn't a man reacting. This was a man responding, with purpose, with fury, with clarity. And suddenly the concrete under my feet didn't feel as cold. By noon, we were sitting in a mahogany-paneled bank office downtown, the kind with brass trim and the smell of old money. Grandpa had pulled every string he had to get us in that quickly. Across the polished desk sat a banker, a woman in her 50s with sharp glasses and sharper eyes. She greeted Grandpa with the kind of respect you don't fake. She tapped at her keyboard, squinting slightly at the screen. "I do see the transfer here," she finally said. "From Mr. Whitmore's account to Daniel Whitmore, noted as gift for Riley's condo." I sat up straighter. She clicked again. My stomach twisted. "There's another transfer," she said. 5 days later, entire amount moved into a private investment fund. Under Daniel Whitmore's name. No reference to you. I felt something tighten in my chest, like a string pulled too far. My fists clenched in my lap. My throat burned, but I didn't let it show. Grandpa didn't say anything for a moment. Then he calmly asked, "Can you print that for me?" "Of course," she replied. As she stepped away to retrieve the documents, Grandpa turned to me. His eyes weren't just angry now, they were wounded, like someone who had raised a child and was now seeing a stranger in their place. "He betrayed you," he said, "and he lied to me. This isn't just family drama, Riley, this is theft." I nodded slowly. "Don't worry," he added, voice trembling with restraint. "I'll handle it." But I shook my head. "No," I said, "we'll handle it." That afternoon, we didn't go home. We drove straight to my parents' house, the one I hadn't stepped foot in since the day I moved out with 2 trash bags and no one offering to help. The same house where my sister threw a party with my things still on the lawn. Where Dad once taught me to ride a bike, before he decided I wasn't worth picking up the phone for. I sat in the passenger seat staring at the familiar porch, my fingers cold against the folded printouts in my hand. Grandpa reached for the doorbell. And for the first time in years, I wasn't just someone's daughter walking up the steps of a childhood home. I was a witness, a plaintiff, and I wasn't leaving until the truth was heard. If you've ever had to choose between keeping the peace and demanding the truth, tell me, what did you choose? Because at that doorstep, I chose truth. And I wasn't going to knock softly. The door swung open with a click that sounded louder than it should have. My father stood in the doorway, half confused, half annoyed, like we were door-to-door salesmen interrupting his weekend. He opened his mouth to say something, probably some rehearsed version of "what a surprise," but froze when he saw the person standing next to me. Grandpa didn't say a word at first. He simply took a step forward and looked my father square in the eye like he was seeing him for the first time. "We need to talk," Grandpa said, his voice low, even, final. Dad chuckled weakly. "I'm kind of busy. Sit down." Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. It was the way he said it, the weight behind it, that made Dad step aside without another word. Mom peeked around the hallway, drying her hands on a dish towel. She stopped when she saw me, lips parting slightly, brows tightening. My sister hovered on the staircase halfway down, clearly catching the scent of tension like it was perfume. We all ended up in the living room, the same one I used to sit in during movie nights, curled up on the floor with a bowl of popcorn. Funny how places can hold memories and betrayals in the same furniture. Grandpa sat across from Dad, placed a thick folder on the coffee table, and gently slid it forward. Dad didn't even glance at it. "What's this?" he muttered. "That," Grandpa said, "is every record of the $75,000 I sent you, and every record of how you moved it, away from Riley, into an investment account, under your own name. You told me she was living in that condo," Grandpa continued louder now. "You told me she loved it, that it changed her life. You let me believe I helped her. I was holding it for her future," Dad said quickly, voice rising. "I didn't touch a dime. Don't," I said, cutting in sharper than I'd ever let myself speak in this house before. "Don't lie again." He blinked at me, startled, like he couldn't believe I had spoken, like he expected me to sit quietly like I used to. "You told me I was lazy," I continued, "that I didn't deserve handouts, that I should build my own path, all while you sat back and collected interest on the path Grandpa built for me." The room was still. Even the air felt like it had stopped moving. Grandpa reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a smaller envelope. "I've already spoken to my lawyer," he said. "If you don't return the full amount within 30 days, we will pursue legal action." Dad opened his mouth, but Grandpa wasn't finished. "And you will read a statement at brunch next week, in front of everyone. You will own what you did. No more secrets. No more pretending you're the noble father. That ends now." I looked at my mother. Her eyes were wide, glassy. "Daniel," she whispered, "tell me this isn't true." But he didn't say a word. And somehow that silence said everything. If you've ever faced someone who looked you in the eye and denied what you both knew was true, tell me, how did you hold your ground? And if you're still searching for the courage to speak, maybe this is your sign. Speak it anyway, and don't look back. The days that followed were filled with a strange mixture of relief and tension. Relief because the truth was finally out in the open, no longer buried under years of lies and silence. Tension because I knew the battle was far from over. Grandpa took the lead. Every morning I would wake up to the sound of his deep voice on the phone, firm, commanding, relentless. He wasn't just fighting for me, he was fighting for the justice that had been stolen from me. And for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this fight. One afternoon, as I sat in my cramped garage apartment, I pulled out an old dust-covered folder, my designs. It had been tucked away behind bills and job applications, a forgotten dream buried under the weight of survival. My fingers traced the sketches, floor plans, room layouts, creative concepts for small spaces. I remembered the day Dad told me, "That's cute, but when are you going to get serious?" The sting of those words still lingered. But now, something inside me shifted. I wasn't going to hide anymore. With renewed determination, I started submitting my portfolio to design studios and freelance networks. Each application was a step toward reclaiming the future Dad had tried to steal. Weeks passed, then months. Rejections and silences filled the gaps, but I kept going. Then one day, my phone rang. It was a local architecture firm launching a community housing project. They needed someone who understood making the most out of small spaces. Someone who had lived that experience. I smiled, thinking I've lived that. When I walked into their downtown office for the interview, I wore the same beige coat Mom once called childish. The receptionist offered me a glass of water. The creative director welcomed me with a seat and a warm smile. By the end of the meeting, I had a contract in hand. This wasn't just a job. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't the failure they made me out to be. Proof that living in a garage didn't mean I was beneath anyone. Months later, I hosted a brunch, but this time it was at my own place. Real plates, real laughter, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Grandpa brought fresh flowers and placed them in a vase I bought myself with my first paycheck. My cousin, who used to roll her eyes whenever I spoke about art, leaned in to ask about color palettes and mood boards. Dad wasn't there. He hadn't been since that day at the brunch when everything changed. He paid back the money on time, but his apology stayed on paper, and that was okay. Because some absences are the greatest gifts. As I passed around trays of freshly baked scones, I caught Grandpa watching me with a soft smile. "This," he said quietly, "is what I imagined. I reached out and touched his hand. Me too. The evening after the brunch, I sat on Grandpa's porch staring up at the stars. The cool night air brushed against my skin, and the quiet around me felt like a balm for years of chaos. Grandpa sat beside me, his presence steady and calm. "I still can't believe you never asked for anything," he said softly, breaking the silence. I looked over at him, shadows playing across his weathered face. "I was done asking," I replied quietly. The words surprised even me, carrying the weight of countless disappointments and broken promises. He nodded slowly, understanding more than words could say. "I'm sorry I didn't check sooner. I should have." I shook my head. "I'm not sorry." He looked at me confused. "I'm not sorry because now I know who's really in my corner." That night, something settled inside me, a shift from desperation to determination. I wasn't going back to that basement, to that life of quiet struggle and hidden pain. Grandpa had promised to find me a place, a real home where I could finally breathe. True to his word, within weeks I moved into a small apartment downtown. Light wood floors, big windows that let in sunlight, and the kind of peace I hadn't known in years. The first morning I woke there, the sun streamed through the windows like it had been waiting just for me. I didn't hear barking dogs or creaking pipes, just silence. Just peace. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I stared out at the city skyline and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: safety, hope, possibility. That day I dusted off the folder labeled designs, the one I'd hidden away since college, afraid to believe in dreams that felt too big for someone like me. I opened my laptop and started typing, submitting applications, reaching out to connections, and rebuilding my career on my own terms. Months passed. Rejections came, but so did opportunities. One afternoon, I got a call from a local architecture firm that had seen my work. They were launching a community housing project and needed someone who understood how to make the most of small, challenging spaces. I smiled to myself. I understood. When I walked into their office for the interview, I wore the same beige coat Mom used to call childish and cheap. The receptionist smiled kindly, and the creative director greeted me warmly. By the end of the meeting, I held a contract in my hands. It wasn't just a job, it was proof. Proof that I was never the failure I'd been told I was. That living in a basement or a garage apartment didn't define my worth or my future. Months later, I hosted brunch again. This time it was at my place, real plates on the table, real laughter filling the rooms, sunlight pouring through the windows. Grandpa brought fresh flowers and placed them in the vase I'd bought with my first paycheck. My cousin, who used to roll her eyes at my art, leaned over and asked about color palettes and mood boards. Dad wasn't there. He hadn't come back since that day at brunch when everything changed. He paid back the money on time, but the apologies stayed on paper. And that was fine with me, because some absences are the greatest pieces of all. As I passed around trays of fresh scones, I caught Grandpa's soft smile watching me. "This," he said quietly, "this is what I imagined." I reached over and squeezed his hand. "Me too." If you've ever been told you're less than enough or been made to feel invisible in your own family, know this: your story is not over. Healing takes time, but it starts with reclaiming your voice. And if you're still finding yours, leave a comment and share your journey. You're not alone. If this story touched you, consider subscribing. Together, we'll navigate the twists and turns of family, truth, and freedom, one step at a time. The following morning, sunlight poured through the tall windows of my new apartment, casting warm golden rays across the polished wooden floors. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up to the muffled sounds of my neighbor's barking dog or the creaking of old pipes. Instead, I breathed in the calm, quiet air and let myself feel safe. That morning, as I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, my phone buzzed with notifications. Messages from friends congratulating me on my new job, emails from architecture firms expressing interest in my portfolio, and even a text from my grandfather reminding me to stay strong. It felt surreal, like I was stepping into a world I had only dreamed of. Despite the peaceful surroundings, I couldn't shake the memories of the past, the years spent scraping by, the silence from my family, the sting of betrayal. But with every passing day, those memories grew softer, overshadowed by the promise of a new beginning. I dedicated myself to my work with renewed vigor. Late nights were spent sketching designs, refining layouts, and researching sustainable materials. The project I landed at the architecture firm wasn't just a job. It was a chance to transform how people live in small spaces, something I intimately understood. At work, I found camaraderie among colleagues who respected my creativity and tenacity. The creative director often praised my unique perspective, reminding me that lived experience can be the greatest teacher. One afternoon, while presenting my design ideas to the team, I noticed a familiar face in the crowd: my cousin. She had come to observe the project. Later, she approached me with genuine interest, asking detailed questions about color schemes and lighting. It was a small but meaningful moment of connection, a bridge mending past distance. Meanwhile, the silence from my father remained unbroken. He had repaid the money he owed but never reached out to reconcile, and honestly, I didn't expect him to. Some relationships, I realized, are better left in the past. With every step forward, I built not just my career but my self-worth. I transformed from the girl who lived in a basement into a woman who owned her story and her future. Months later, I hosted a brunch at my apartment, a gathering filled with laughter, sunlight, and warmth. Grandpa brought a bouquet of fresh flowers, placing them in a vase I had bought with my first paycheck. The scent of blossoms mingled with the aroma of freshly baked scones. As I passed around the tray, I caught Grandpa's eye. He smiled softly and said, "This is everything I hoped for you." I squeezed his hand, feeling a deep sense of gratitude and belonging. That day, I knew I had finally found my place, not just a home but a life reclaimed. Days turned into weeks and my life began to take on a rhythm I hadn't known in years. I woke up every morning with a renewed sense of purpose, fueled by the knowledge that I was finally steering my own course. The ache from the past lingered, but it no longer held me captive. My mornings often started with coffee on the balcony overlooking the city skyline. The sun would rise, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, reminding me that each day brought new possibilities. It was a stark contrast to the cramped, dark basement where I had once lived, a place where hope felt distant and dreams seemed unattainable. Work at the architecture firm grew more demanding, but I welcomed the challenge. Designing community housing for people with limited means was more than just a job, it was personal. Every blueprint I drew, every material choice I made was informed by my own experiences of living in a small, uncomfortable space. I was determined to create homes that offered dignity and comfort no matter the size. The team appreciated my insights, and I quickly became a trusted voice during design meetings. I shared stories of my own struggles, not to seek sympathy but to highlight the importance of thoughtful, human-centered design. My colleagues listened, and together we crafted plans that balanced functionality with beauty. Outside of work, my relationships slowly healed. Grandpa remained my steadfast supporter, a constant source of encouragement. We often talked late into the night about dreams, life, and the future. His belief in me helped fuel my confidence on days when self-doubt crept in. My mother reached out cautiously, asking to meet for lunch. The conversation was tentative but genuine. She apologized for her silence and expressed regret for not standing up for me when it mattered most. Though the wounds were still fresh, I chose to accept her olive branch and began rebuilding that fragile bond. My sister, too, began to show interest in my life, asking questions about my work in the apartment. It wasn't easy to let go of the past, but I realized that forgiveness was as much for me as it was for them. Meanwhile, my father remained absent. He sent a letter acknowledging his mistakes and promising restitution, but he didn't reach out personally. And as much as part of me longed for reconciliation, another part knew that healing sometimes requires distance. One afternoon, I found myself hosting a small gathering at my apartment. The room was filled with friends, colleagues, and family members who had stood by me. Laughter echoed against the walls, and sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the space like a warm embrace. As I looked around, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. The journey had been painful and long, but I had emerged stronger. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was thriving. That night, as the last guest left and the city lights twinkled outside, I sat quietly reflecting on how far I'd come. The battles fought, the tears shed, the moments of doubt, all had shaped me into the woman I was today. If you're on your own path of rebuilding, know that healing is possible. Your story matters, and every step forward is a victory. Share your journey in the comments below. You never know who you might inspire. If this story has touched your heart, consider subscribing to this channel. Together we'll continue exploring stories of resilience, courage, and the unbreakable human spirit. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of changes, both exciting and challenging. My new job kept me busy, but it also gave me a sense of accomplishment I had never experienced before. For the first time, I was contributing to projects that truly mattered, creating affordable housing solutions that could change lives just as my own life was being transformed. One afternoon, after a long day of meetings and site visits, I received an unexpected visitor. My cousin Emily, someone I hadn't been close to in years, showed up at my apartment with a hesitant smile. We hadn't spoken much since the family drama unfolded, but there she was standing on my doorstep wanting to reconnect. We sat down with cups of tea, the air thick with unspoken words. She asked about my designs, my dreams, and how I managed to keep going despite everything. Her curiosity felt genuine, and for the first time I sensed a bridge rebuilding between us. Our conversation reminded me how important it is to hold on to the people who truly care, even when family bonds feel fractured. Forgiveness and understanding aren't easy, but they are often the first steps toward healing. Meanwhile, I continued to avoid contact with my father. Though he had repaid the stolen money and sent an apology letter, he made no effort to meet or make amends. Part of me felt relief, another part a lingering sadness. But I knew I had to protect my own peace. At work, I started collaborating closely with the creative director, Sarah. She became a mentor and a friend, encouraging me to push my boundaries and develop my own design style. Her belief in me was empowering, and I began to envision a future where my work could impact not just my community but others as well. One evening, Sarah invited me to a local architecture event. Standing among industry leaders and innovators, I realized how far I'd come. From living in a dark, cramped garage to being recognized for my ideas and talent, it was a transformation I never thought possible. Back home, the apartment had become my sanctuary. I decorated it with care, choosing colors that reflected hope and strength. Plants filled the windowsills, bringing life and freshness. The space was small but filled with light, a symbol of my journey from darkness to clarity. Throughout it all, Grandpa remained my rock. We celebrated milestones together, from my first design contract to the launch of my portfolio website. His pride in me was quiet but unmistakable. Every time I caught his smile, I felt a deep gratitude for the unwavering support he gave me when I needed it most. I also took time to reflect on the lessons this journey had taught me: the importance of standing up for yourself, the power of perseverance, and the value of surrounding yourself with people who truly care. One afternoon, while walking through a nearby park, I ran into an old friend from college. We talked about the future, about dreams deferred and now pursued with renewed passion. It felt like a full circle, a reminder that life's twists and turns often lead us exactly where we need to be. As the months went by, I settled deeper into my new life, a life that felt like it was truly mine. The apartment wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was a home filled with moments of quiet joy and hard-earned peace. The sunlight pouring through the windows became a daily reminder that I was no longer living in the shadows of my past. At work, I found myself taking on more responsibility. The community housing project had grown, and I was now leading a small team of designers. Each day presented new challenges, but also new chances to make a real difference. I poured my heart into the work, knowing that this was more than a career, it was a mission. One evening after a long day, I sat in my living room reviewing blueprints. The sound of laughter from a nearby cafe drifted through the open window. It was a simple moment, but it filled me with a sense of gratitude. I had survived the betrayal, the hardship, and the silence, and now I was building something lasting. Still, the memory of my father lingered like a shadow. Though he had returned the money and sent his apologies on paper, he had not reached out personally. The silence from him was a painful reminder that not all wounds heal with time. But I was learning to accept that some relationships are not meant to be mended. Protecting my peace became my priority. I surrounded myself with those who lifted me up, friends, mentors, and of course, Grandpa, who never wavered in his support. One weekend, Grandpa and I took a trip to a local art museum. As we wandered through the galleries, I shared my dreams of one day designing not just housing, but entire community spaces where people could feel safe, valued, and inspired. He smiled, his eyes twinkling with pride. "You've come so far, Riley," he said softly. "I always believed in you." His words carried weight I hadn't realized I needed. They anchored me, reminding me that I was never alone. Later that month, I received an invitation to speak at a conference on affordable housing. The thought of standing before a crowd sharing my story and vision was daunting, but I knew it was another step forward, a chance to transform pain into purpose. Preparing my speech, I reflected on the lessons learned: resilience in the face of betrayal, the importance of self-worth, and the power of forgiveness, not always for others but for myself. On the day of the conference, I stood before an audience of architects, planners, and community leaders. I shared my journey: the basement, the betrayal, the fight for justice, and the path to healing. I talked about designing homes that nurture, communities that uplift, and the responsibility we all share to create spaces where everyone can thrive. The applause was overwhelming. But more than that, I saw faces lit with understanding and hope. I knew then that my story was bigger than me. Back at home, the apartment felt even more like a sanctuary. The walls echoed with possibility. The windows framed a future I was ready to embrace. The seasons changed, and so did I. With each passing day, I grew stronger, not just in body, but in spirit. The scars left by betrayal and silence remained, but they no longer defined me. Instead, they became the foundation upon which I built my new life. At work, I was thriving. The community housing project expanded to include more neighborhoods, more families, more people who deserved a safe place to call home. I led workshops with residents, listening to their stories and incorporating their needs into our designs. It was a humbling and rewarding experience. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a message that surprised me. It was from my mother. She wrote, "I'm proud of you, Riley. Keep shining." It wasn't much, but it was enough to make my heart skip a beat. The slow mending of our relationship was a fragile hope I hadn't dared to imagine before. In contrast, my father remained distant. Despite repaying the money and sending letters, he made no effort to reconnect. Part of me mourned the loss of that relationship, but I knew some people aren't meant to stay in our lives. Protecting my peace was more important than seeking approval from someone who had caused so much pain. Grandpa, ever my steadfast ally, celebrated every milestone with me. We spent evenings on the porch talking about dreams, failures, and the road ahead. His quiet wisdom and unwavering belief gave me strength on days when doubt threatened to overwhelm me. I also rekindled connections with old friends and made new ones who supported and inspired me. Together, we shared stories of struggle and triumph, reminding each other that resilience is a journey, not a destination. One weekend, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment, a celebration of growth and healing. Friends, colleagues, and family members who stood by me filled the room with laughter and warmth. Grandpa brought flowers, placing them in a vase I had chosen myself, symbolizing the life I was now nurturing. As I looked around the room, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey had been long and painful, but it had shaped me into the woman I was today, someone capable of love, forgiveness, and fierce determination. That night, as the last guest left and the city lights twinkled outside, I sat quietly, reflecting on the power of truth and the importance of standing up for oneself. I realized that healing isn't linear. It's messy, complicated, and deeply personal. But with courage and support, it's possible. If you're on your own path of healing and self-discovery, remember that every step forward is a victory. Share your story in the comments below. Your voice might be the light someone else needs. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and join our community of resilience and hope. Together, we'll continue to face life's challenges with strength and grace. Life continued to unfold in unexpected ways, teaching me lessons I never anticipated. While I was rebuilding my career and forging new relationships, I learned that true freedom comes not just from external changes, but from within. One quiet evening, I sat alone in my apartment, the city lights shimmering through the windows. I pulled out my old sketchbook, the pages filled with ideas, dreams, and ambitions I had almost forgotten. As I traced the lines of my past designs, I realized how much I had grown, not only as an artist but as a person. The journey had been painful. The betrayal of my own family cut deep, and the silence that followed was deafening. But through it all, I discovered resilience I didn't know I had. I learned to forgive, not to excuse the wrongs done to me, but to free myself from their hold. Grandpa's presence remained a constant source of strength. We spent many afternoons sharing stories and wisdom, his life experiences guiding me through the complexities of healing. His belief in me never wavered, even when I doubted myself. At work, my confidence soared. I was entrusted with larger projects, mentoring younger designers and advocating for inclusive, compassionate architecture. Each success was a reminder that I was more than my past. I was the architect of my future. Meanwhile, my mother and sister made efforts to reconnect, showing up at events and sending thoughtful messages. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. I chose to embrace the possibility of rebuilding, recognizing that relationships, like homes, require care and patience. My father's absence remained a wound, but I no longer let it define me. I focused instead on nurturing the bonds that uplifted me and building a life rooted in truth and self-respect. One day, during a community meeting, a young woman approached me. She shared her story, one of struggle, betrayal, and hope. Listening to her, I saw reflections of my own journey. I encouraged her to hold on to her dreams, to believe in her worth, and to fight for the life she deserved. That moment reminded me that our stories have power to heal, to inspire, and to connect. If you're healing from your own wounds, know that you're not alone. Share your experiences in the comments. Your courage could light the way for someone else. If this story has touched you, please subscribe and join a community dedicated to resilience, growth, and hope. Together, we'll continue to write stories of strength and transformation. By now, my life felt like a tapestry woven from threads of pain, resilience, and hope. Every challenge I'd faced, every betrayal, every moment of doubt had added depth and color to the person I was becoming. One crisp autumn morning, as I sipped my coffee on the balcony, my phone buzzed with a notification. It was an invitation to speak at a local charity event focused on empowering women through education and community development. Standing before the crowd that evening, I shared my story: the basement apartment, the stolen money, the fight to reclaim my future. I spoke not just about the hardships, but about the strength it took to overcome them, about the power of forgiveness and self-belief. The room was filled with faces reflecting hope and understanding. As I looked out at the sea of listeners, I realized my journey had grown beyond me. It had become a beacon for others. Backstage, a woman approached me with tears in her eyes. She thanked me for my courage, sharing how my story gave her the strength to stand up to her own struggles. That night, as I lay in bed, I felt a profound sense of purpose. The pain of the past hadn't disappeared, but it had transformed into a wellspring of strength and compassion. Over the following weeks, I continued to grow personally and professionally. I launched a small nonprofit to support young women pursuing careers in design and architecture, focusing on those facing economic hardship. Grandpa was there every step of the way, proud and unwavering. We celebrated each milestone, from the first scholarship awarded to the first community workshop hosted. Family ties began to mend in subtle ways. My mother and sister attended events offering support and encouragement. While my father remained absent, I had learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about those who choose to stand beside you. Through it all, I held on to a core belief that no matter how dark the past, the future remains unwritten. If you've been carrying the weight of your story alone, remember that sharing it can be the first step toward healing. I invite you to leave your story in the comments and connect with others walking similar paths. If this journey inspires you, please subscribe and be part of a community that values resilience, empowerment, and hope. Together, we will rise. As winter settled in, the city was wrapped in a quiet hush, but inside me a fire burned brighter than ever. I had come a long way from that girl who once lived in a basement, overlooked and underestimated. Now I stood firmly in my own light, determined to shape a future that no one could steal. One chilly morning, I met with a group of young women at a community center. They were eager, passionate, and full of potential, but many were burdened by circumstances I recognized all too well. I shared my story openly, hoping to inspire courage and resilience in their hearts. Your past doesn't define you, I told them. It's the choices you make now that build the life you deserve. Their eyes sparkled with hope, and I saw in them the next generation ready to rise. That same week, a major milestone came when the nonprofit I'd founded received a grant to expand its outreach. It was a victory not just for me, but for every young woman we aimed to support. Back at home, the apartment had become a true sanctuary. I decorated it with warmth and personality, plants, artwork, cozy throws, a reflection of the woman I was becoming. The windows framed the city lights like stars, reminding me that even in the darkest times there is light. Grandpa visited often, always with a knowing smile and a few words of wisdom. His pride was quiet but unmistakable. Yet despite the progress, I never forgot the lessons of my journey, the importance of standing up for oneself, the strength found in forgiveness, and the courage to embrace change. As the new year approached, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The path had been rocky, but it had led me here to a place of empowerment, purpose, and love. If you're fighting your own battles, remember that growth takes time and healing is possible. Share your story in the comments below. Your voice could light the way for someone else. If this story has touched you, please subscribe and join a community dedicated to resilience, hope, and transformation. Together, we'll continue to face life's challenges with strength and grace. The next few months were a testament to how much I had transformed, not just in circumstance, but in spirit. I had become a woman who no longer shied away from her truth or the challenges that came with it. Instead, I faced them head-on, armed with lessons from my past and a vision for my future. Work flourished. I led several successful projects that made a tangible difference in people's lives. Designing affordable housing was no longer just a job, it was a calling. Each blueprint carried a piece of my story, the struggle, the hope, the unyielding belief that everyone deserves a place to call home. My nonprofit grew, touching more lives every day. I hosted workshops and mentorship programs, sharing not only my professional expertise but also my personal journey of resilience and self-discovery. Watching young women bloom into confident creators and leaders became one of my greatest joys. Family life was more complicated. While my mother and sister made genuine efforts to reconnect, my father remained distant. I had accepted that some relationships are not meant to be repaired. My peace mattered more than unfinished conversations or unmet expectations. Grandpa continued to be my rock. His quiet support and wisdom grounded me through every twist and turn. We celebrated every victory together, from small wins like a successful presentation to major milestones like the launch of our community housing initiative. One evening, as I prepared for a panel discussion on women in architecture, Grandpa handed me a letter. It was from my father, a long overdue apology and a request to meet. For a moment I hesitated. The pain was still fresh, but so was my newfound strength. I knew that forgiveness, if it came, would be on my terms, a choice, not a necessity. That night, as I looked out over the city skyline from my apartment, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. The journey from that cramped basement to this moment was filled with hardship, heartache, and growth, but it was mine, and I owned every part of it. If you're on your own path of healing and empowerment, remember that your story is yours to tell and you have the power to write the ending. Share your experiences in the comments. Your courage might inspire someone else to keep moving forward. If this story resonates with you, please subscribe and be part of a community dedicated to strength, resilience, and hope. Together, we'll continue to rise. As I close this chapter, I want to remind you that life is a journey filled with unexpected twists, challenges, and moments of clarity. We are shaped not only by the obstacles we face, but by how we choose to respond to them. Reclaiming your story means embracing both the pain and the triumph, acknowledging the scars while celebrating the growth. It means standing tall in your truth even when the world tries to dim your light. If you found strength in my journey, remember that your own path is just as valid and powerful. Healing takes time, patience, and sometimes the courage to walk away from what no longer serves you. Surround yourself with those who uplift and believe in you. Speak your truth with confidence and never let anyone else define your worth. Thank you for sharing these moments with me. Your presence here means more than words can express. If you believe in the power of resilience and the right to live authentically, I invite you to subscribe, comment, and join a community that champions courage and hope. Together we will continue to write stories of transformation one brave step at a time.